play with a lot of different musicians in different capacities. What inspires you to create these varying projects, and how do you go about choosing those specific artists?
Once again, I have to point back to my origins growing up in Philly. I grew up in such a musically diverse household. You know, it was nothing to hear, you know, Coltrane behind the Temptations, behind Mozart, behind Mahalia Jackson. You know, just all of this great music being mixed up together. So I never got the whole, you know, well, this is that music and this is that music, you know, this is jazz, this is classical. I mean, obviously I knew that I was aware of these different styles, but everyone I grew up around listened to this music with the same ear. It was never a case of, oh, you like funk too? You know, it's just like, well, of course I like, who doesn't like funk, you know? I mean, just because I'm primarily a jazz musician, you know, doesn't mean we don't have the capacity to love James Brown for the same reasons everyone else loves James Brown, you know? So I always had this modus operandi of being able to play with as many different people as I could, just because I love playing all these different styles, you know. I think that playing a lot of different styles of music, it has been thought from time to time that, you know, it's a conscious effort to maybe try to show people that I can play all these different kinds of styles, but I'm not trying to show anybody anything. I just really love playing a whole lot of different styles of music.
Yeah, I mean, every time I've seen you, it's been something different, which I appreciate.
Yeah,
because it's like I can go see you, and it's not like every single time, like that. The movement.
Right.
I never thought it like a jazz musician could do something
man.
that was like, you know, fusing classical with, you know, spoken word.
Right.
It was very cool.
Well, you know, and you asking how I put these things together. I think all musicians have a certain personality. A lot of musicians are, well, actually, we as human beings, we have our own particular specialties. We have things that we're very strong at. We have things we're weak at, you know. So I think as a band leader or as a conceptualizer, you play with all these different musicians. You kind of hear in your mind what you want the project to sound like or what you want it to be, and you call the guys that you know accordingly.
Who has been your favorite musician you've had the opportunity of playing with?
That's a hard one.
I know it would be because your list of who you played with is awesome.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I've had a lot of different favorite people. Benny Green, who was probably my closest musical confidant when I first moved to New York, playing in his trio in the early 90s. That was the first band that I played in. I mean, even more than Bobby Watson's band, more than Benny Golson's band, even more than Freddie Hubbard's band. I mean, Benny Green, we rehearsed all the time. He had a real concept for what he wanted his trio to be, and we rehearsed all the time. Everybody contributed music. I mean, it was mostly Benny's original material and all his arrangements, but that was the first group I ever played in that felt like a band. You know what I mean? That was the first group I played in where you knew if one person couldn't make the gig, then you couldn't take the gig. You couldn't call a sub to come in and learn all that stuff, you know. Benny was one of my favorites. Roy Hargrove, nobody has his spirit, you know. You know, I remember being on the road with Pat Metheny once, and you know, Pat's a big basketball fan, and he was saying how much he loves Allen Iverson because he's so fearless and he has so much heart, and he wears his feelings on his sleeve. And he says, you know, Roy Hargrove is like that. And I said, you nailed it. You know, Roy Hargrove and AI, you know, they're the same spirit, you know. Freddie Hubbard, I was very fortunate to be around him, you know, when he was still playing really strong. I cherish moments like that, being around Ray Brown, Milt Jackson.
Absolutely.
Gosh, Chick, of course, you know, McCoy Tyner. Oh man, too many people to name.
Hank Jones,
yeah.
I love that album that you did with him.
Yeah, man, and you know, you know, it's funny, when I got married, my wife and I were putting a list together for all the groomsmen and all the bridesmaids. Like, almost everyone on my list were drummers. And I think as a bass player, that makes perfect sense, because who are we closest with anyone else in the band except the drummer?
Exactly.
You know, so like Lewis Nash, Greg Hutchinson, Terry Gully, Carl Allen, you know, all my boys were on that band. So all my drum brethren, you know, are like that.
That's awesome. Of the musicians you haven't had the chance to play with, who would you most like to play with?
That are still alive or no longer alive?
You can do one of these.
Well, I can't play with them if they're no longer alive.
So.
I knew that. Those are super you know what I'm saying. You know, I would have said Ornette Coleman about a month ago, but I got a chance to play with him, sort of, at Sonny Rollins' 80th birthday concert in New York. And he came and sat in with us on one song.
That's awesome.
And surely I would have to say, as far as, I mean, sharing the stage with Sonny Rollins, Ornette Coleman, and Roy Haynes, that's about as undiluted and about as royal as it gets. Absolutely. Doesn't get more royal than that. So I'm very honored that I got to play with that group of musicians. But people who I haven't had a chance to play with that I would want to play with, I want to be able to play with all of the people who I've already played with more often.
Absolutely. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
I like that.